Another distress signal, Lieutenant Park announced, her voice flat. Eleni, designating themselves as Aurora, pleading for assistance against the Krill again. Admiral Tyler Thomas didn't bother looking up from his datapad. The blue light reflected in the deep lines etched around his eyes, lines that spoke of battles fought and won and battles lost in other ways. Decline it. Park's fingers paused over her console. Sir, there. Insistent. And the Krill have been particularly active in that sector. Their reputation. Thomas finally glanced up, his gaze sweeping across the bridge of the Daedalus. The hum of the life support systems, the soft glow of the tactical displays, the focused silence of the crew, it was a familiar, almost comforting symphony. Beyond the viewport, the black velvet of space stretched out, speckled with the cold fire of distant stars. A vast, indifferent canvas. Their reputation precedes them, Lieutenant, as do the Eleni's pleas. He knew what Park was thinking, knew she was recalling the commendations that lined his record, the battles where he'd turned the tide against overwhelming odds. But she also knew what the official reports didn't mention, the faces of the civilians caught in the crossfire during the Evora campaign, their silent screams echoing in his dreams. That mission, deemed a strategic success, had come with a price he still paid every night. Council policy, he reminded himself, dictates minimal engagement outside established Terran territories. Resources are stretched thin. We protect our own. Understood, sir, Park replied, her tone neutral, efficient, loyal, but with an edge that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. He appreciated that. A good officer questioned orders, especially when lives were on the line. But with respect, Admiral, the Eleni are a signatory to the Concordance, and the Krill. The Krill exploit loopholes, Thomas finished for her, his voice hardening. They expand rapidly, consume everything in their path. They're a plague, Lieutenant, but one the Council deems manageable so long as they stay on their side of the galactic divide. He tapped the datapad. Earth's interests come first, Park, always. It was a mantra, a shield against the nagging doubts that clawed at his conscience. Duty versus cynicism, a battle he fought daily. Aurora, Park murmured, more to herself than to him. The name hung in the air, a fragile promise of something. More, a connection perhaps, empathy even. Concepts that felt increasingly alien in this cold, calculating corner of the galaxy. Sir, a new voice cut through the quiet. Ensign Jones at the sensor array, his fingers flying across the controls. New data incoming, the Krill. They've done something to the Eleni. Sensor readings indicate a disruption of their empathic network. It's as if they have disabled it. And they are exploiting the planet's resources at a rate previously thought impossible. Thomas's eyes sharp. The Eleni's ability to connect with each other through empathy was their strength, their identity. To sever that, it was a violation unlike anything he had seen. His gaze flicked back to Park, the lines around his eyes deepening. Something shifted within him, a flicker of something that had been dormant for too long. Open a secure channel, he ordered, his voice low, the weariness replaced by a sharp edge. I want every piece of data we have on the Eleni, on the Krill, everything. He paused, his gaze hardening. The weight of command settled back onto his shoulders, heavy but familiar. And Lieutenant, he added, his voice firm, prepare preliminary fleet deployment plans. Let's see what options we have. Just in case. Thomas reviewed the data package, his gaze lingering on the Eleni casualty reports, row upon row of stylized empathic profiles, flatlined. Something about the uniformity of the loss chilled him more than the numbers themselves. Then came the Krill combat schematics, angular, black ships that seemed to absorb light. One image, a Krill boarding party engaging Eleni defenders, flashed across the screen. The Eleni, frail and luminous, stood little chance against the Krill's insectal exoskeletons and energy blades. Not again, he thought, the image blurring into a half-forgotten memory. A civilian transport burning against the black void, the screams. He slammed the datapad shut. Damn it, Thomas. You can't save everyone. Park materialized beside him, holographic fleet deployment plans shimmering in the air between them. Admiral, preliminary projections indicate a Krill blockade of the Aleni system, 3 primary choke points. Their fleet composition suggests. She tapped a series of icons, Krill destroyer silhouettes rotating into view. A significant upgrade in firepower since the last engagement. Thomas circled a point on the holographic map. That nebula, can we use it for cover? Potentially, sir, but it's highly unstable. Navigational hazards are extreme. Extreme is relative, Lieutenant. What are our options? He initiated a secure comm channel, the encryption protocol cycling through layers of Terran intelligence. A face flickered onto the screen, a woman with tired eyes and a network of scars etched around her neural implants. Admiral Thomas, she greeted him, her voice a low rasp. What can I do for you off the record? The Krill, Thomas said, cutting to the chase. Their motivations, their capabilities, anything you're not telling the public. The woman hesitated. Rumors, Admiral, just whispers. A new weapon, something that disrupts energy fields on a quantum level. No hard data, but the intel chatter is insistent. A weapon that disrupts energy fields, Thomas repeated, his gut twisting. That would explain the efficiency of their attacks against the Aleni. Thank you, Sarah. Be careful, Tyler, she said, her gaze lingering on his face. Some things are better left buried. He convened a meeting in the war room. His senior officers, Commander Reyes, Chief Science Officer Ito, and Park sat around the holographic table, their faces grim. The situation is this, Thomas began, laying out the facts. The Aleni are on the verge of collapse. The Krill are stronger, faster, and possibly armed with a new weapon. The Council is reluctant. Ito, a woman whose passion for science bordered on obsession, leaned forward. Admiral, from a purely scientific perspective, the Aleni present a unique opportunity. Their empathic link, its disruption by the Krill. Imagine the breakthroughs we could achieve in understanding consciousness itself. Reyes, a hardened combat veteran, scoffed. With all due respect, Doctor, we're talking about genocide, not a research grant. The Krill are a threat to everyone. We need to hit them hard, hit them now. Or, Park interjected, her voice calm and measured, we proceed with caution. The Council has made its priorities clear. We risk provoking a war we can't afford. What are the alternatives? Thomas asked, turning to each of them in turn. Reyes, what's your plan of attack? Ito, how can we exploit their technology? Park, what are the contingencies if this goes south? He tasked them with developing alternative strategies, emphasizing the need for unconventional approaches. As the officers dispersed, Park approached him, her expression troubled. Admiral, incoming priority transmission. Terran Council. The faces of the Council members materialized above the table, a collection of politicians and corporate executives, their expressions tight with concern. Admiral Thomas, the lead representative, a woman named Jones, began, her voice cold and formal. We understand the situation in the Aleni system is volatile. Volatile and deteriorating, Counselor, Thomas corrected her. We are concerned about the political and economic risks of intervening, Jones continued, ignoring his interruption. The Krill are a significant power. Provoking them could have disastrous consequences for Earth. Therefore, another counselor chimed in, you are ordered to prioritize Earth's interests. Avoid any actions that could be construed as aggressive or that could jeopardize our trade agreements with neutral species. Thomas clenched his fist. With all due respect, counselors, the Aleni are facing annihilation. We have a moral imperative to act. Morality doesn't pay the bills, Admiral, Jones retorted. Your duty is to protect Earth, not to play galactic savior. Thomas leveled his gaze at the counselors. Inaction also has consequences, counselors, consequences that must be measured. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Krill are clearly hostile. Appeasement has never worked. And if we stand by and watch an entire species be wiped out, what message does that send to the rest of the galaxy? What kind of future are we building? Jones's face tightened. You are authorized to conduct a limited reconnaissance mission, Admiral, nothing more, and you will adhere to the parameters we have set. Is that understood? Understood, Thomas said, his voice flat. As the Council's image dissolved, Park turned to him. Admiral, we've managed to secure a coded transmission directly from Aurora. She requests an immediate audience. She says time is running out. Thomas stared at the empty space where the counselors had been. Patch it through to my personal console, Lieutenant. Encrypt everything. I want no record of this. He paused, a flicker of something hope, perhaps, or maybe just defiance in his eyes. The Council may have their orders, but I have my own. The comms panel flickered to life, bathing the bridge in an urgent red glow. Aurora's image purposed, her usually serene face etched with raw terror. Behind her, chaos reigned. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and figures darted amidst the destruction. The sounds of explosions and panicked cries echoed in the background, a symphony of despair. Admiral Thomas, Aurora's voice trembled, barely audible above the din. They are everywhere. They are not simply conquering, Admiral. They are severing the threads that bind us, our empathic network. It is under attack. The feed momentarily glitched, revealing a Krill warrior, its chitinous armor gleaming in the firelight, brutally dismantling what appeared to be a central node in the Eleni's communication system. They target the nexus points, Aurora continued, her voice strained. The places where we connect. They understand that our strength lies in our ability to feel. Together. They are trying to isolate us, to break us down into individuals. She paused, gathering her strength. Admiral, our species has always struggled to connect. Our minds are too open, too vulnerable to truly reach each other. This empathic block, it is core to our survival. We believed it could not be overcome, but there are whispers of a solution, a way to finally connect, to truly be one. The Krill, they know this too. They are attempting to prevent us from reaching each other and reaching that solution before it is too late. Thomas leaned forward, his gaze intense. Aurora, these attacks, is there a pattern, a specific type of location they target? What is your species' history with these Krill? They are drawn to conflict, Admiral, Aurora replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. To societal vulnerabilities. Historical data suggests that they exploit existing tensions, amplifying them until entire civilizations collapse. They are like parasites feeding on discord. Lieutenant Park, her fingers flying across her console, spoke up. Admiral, I've analyzed Aurora's transmission. The Krill are focusing their attacks on several key locations, the Grand Empathy Archive, the Unison Monasteries, and several research facilities dedicated to the study of empathic resonance. She highlighted a location on the holographic display, Sector Gamma 9. A research facility, minimal defenses, high strategic value for the Eleni. Thomas's eyebrows furrowed. Redirect Reconnaissance Squadron Beta 7 to Gamma 9, immediately. He turned away from the main view screen, his face obscured by shadow. Damn the Council, damn their political games. These people are dying. A flicker of memory, the burning wreckage of civilian transports, the screams echoing through the void. Never again. The report from Beta 7 arrived an hour later, chilling in its brevity. Sector Gamma 9, total devastation, civilian population, annihilated, evidence of extreme Krill aggression. They are experimenting. The final word was infused with horror. A separate, encrypted data stream followed, containing images that seared themselves into Thomas's mind. Rows of Eleni citizens hooked up to bizarre Krill technology, their faces contorted in silent screams. The Krill were weaponizing their empathy, twisting their greatest strength into a tool of torture. Sir, a voice crackled over the comms, filled with static. We've detected a unique Krill energy signature emanating from the main research facility. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Thomas didn't hesitate. Beta 7, I want that facility investigated. I don't care what the risks are. Find out what they're doing in there. Minutes later, another transmission, this one filled with panic. Admiral, we're under attack. Heavy Krill presence. They were waiting for us. Casualties. Mounting, we need immediate assistance. The transmission abruptly cut off, replaced by a wall of static. Thomas stared at the blank screen, his heart pounding in his chest. The Council's orders echoed in his mind. Maintain a defensive posture. Avoid direct engagement. Do not provoke the Krill, but the images of the tortured Eleni. The desperate plea in Aurora's eyes. Could he live with another failure? Could he stand by and watch as an entire species was consumed by these monsters? He took a deep breath, the air thick with tension. Prepare for full-scale fleet deployment. Set course for the Eleni system. Maximum warp. He sent a coded message to Aurora, a single line of text. Help is on the way. Hold on. Lieutenant Park approached him, her face pale. Admiral, with respect. Are you sure about this? The Council. Thomas turned to face her, his eyes filled with a cold fire. There are things more important than my career, Lieutenant. Sometimes the only choice is to act, whatever the cost. The comms officer looked up, face pale. Admiral, coded message received. High-level Terran Council encryption. Thomas's teeth gritted. He swiveled in his command chair. Decrypt and display. The holographic display flickered, resolving into lines of shimmering code before translating into stark, unavoidable text. Immediate recall order pending. Return to Earth to answer CHARGES of insubordination. SIGNED, Acting Council Chair Doctor. ELARAVANCE. Park, standing nearby, frowned. That's not good, sir. Alarms blared, cutting off any further discussion. Admiral, multiple Krill contacts, closing fast. They're hitting hardpoints around the remaining settlements. Helm, evasive maneuvers. All batteries, target priority. Krill warships. Protect those settlements. Thomas barked, his voice regaining its steely edge. They want to play. Let's show them what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. The Terran fleet surged forward, a wall of plasma fire erupting from their guns. The Krill responded with brutal efficiency, their energy weapons tearing through shields and armor. A nearby frigate shuddered violently as a Krill beam weapon sliced through its hull. Shields at 40%. A panicked voice reported over the comms. We're taking heavy damage. Park's fingers flew across her console. Admiral, their tactics are focused. They're targeting our comms arrays and empathic nodes. Why would they target those? Adapt formation Delta 7, Thomas ordered, his eyes locked on the swirling chaos of the battle. Human agility. Let's see if they can hit what they can't catch. The Terran ships, smaller and more maneuverable than their Krill counterparts, began weaving through the enemy formation, dodging energy blasts and unleashing devastating counterattacks. But the Krill firepower was relentless. Then, static. A garbled message burst through the comms. Research facility. Experiments. Forced amplification. Krill. The signal died, leaving only white noise. Thomas's expression hardened. That was the squadron investigating the research facility. They've gone silent. Park, assemble a strike team. I want that facility secured. Find out what the Krill are up to. Park nodded, her face grim. Aye, sir, I'll take point. And Park, Thomas said, his voice low, be careful. Something about this feels wrong. As Park turned to leave, Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. Flashback, a burning cityscape, screams echoing through the comms. Thomas, younger, his face etched with indecision, staring at a targeting display. Sir, civilian transport requesting evac. Krill fighters inbound. A desperate plea. Then silence. The image of a transport ship exploding in a ball of fire. He opened his eyes, the memory a sharp, visceral pain. Never again. Park's strike team, clad in black tactical armor, breached the research facility's outer defenses. Inside, the scene was a nightmare. Eleni, strapped to grotesque machines, their minds forced open, glowing with an unnatural light. Tubes pumped strange fluids into their veins. The air crackled with psychic energy. "By God!" One of the team members whispered, his voice choked with horror. Park pressed on, her face a mask of tenacity. "Keep moving. Find the data core." They discovered the truth in a central chamber. Holographic displays showed the Krill manipulating the amplified empathy, focusing it into a weapon of unimaginable power. A weapon capable of disrupting entire populations, turning them into docile slaves. Park watched, her stomach twisting. And Eleni, tears streaming down their face, looked directly at her, their eyes filled with unbearable pain. She saw their memories, their fears, their desperate longing for freedom. The Krill guards, alerted to the intrusion, emerged from the shadows. Hulking figures genetically engineered for combat, their eyes burning with cold, reptilian intelligence. Automated turrets swiveled, targeting the strike team. "Contact!" Park yelled, raising her pulse rifle. "Engage!" The room erupted in gunfire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, tearing through metal and flesh. The strike team, outnumbered but highly trained, fought with savage efficiency. They moved as a unit, flanking, suppressing, eliminating threats with ruthless precision. Park, her senses heightened, moved like a ghost, her pulse rifle spitting death. She dove behind cover, dodging a hail of energy fire. A Krill shock trooper charged, its bio-engineered claws dripping with poison. She rolled, firing a burst that tore through its chest. Pushing forward, she reached the data core. Her fingers danced across the console, bypassing security protocols. The schematics of the empathic weapon flooded the screen. She saw its design, its power source, and finally its vulnerabilities. "I've got it." She shouted into her comm, transmitting data to the Admiral now. Back on Earth, the Terran Council chamber was in chaos. Holographic images of the battle flickered above the representatives' heads. "This is reckless," Counselor Jones shouted, his face red with anger. "Thomas has gone rogue. He must be stopped." Counselor Anya Sharma, her expression grim, countered, "The Eleni are on the verge of extinction. Thomas is doing what's necessary. We can't abandon them." "He defied a direct order," Jones roared. "Insubordination cannot be tolerated." "Sometimes," Sharma said, her voice low, "the right thing is insubordination." On the bridge of the Daedalus, Thomas received Park's data transmission. He studied the schematics of the empathic weapon, his brow furrowed in concentration. A coded message flashed across his screen. "Recall order imminent. Council split. SHARMA fighting for you. Good luck." He ignored it. Sirens wailed throughout the ship. "Admiral, massive Krill fleet detected. They're heading straight for the Eleni capital." The main viewscreen showed the horrifying truth. Hundreds of Krill warships descending upon the city, unleashing a storm of destruction. Thomas stared at the data, his mind racing. He saw the weapon's design, its flow of energy, and then a flicker of understanding, the amplified empathy. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a key. "They're not just trying to kill them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're trying to enslave them. They're going to use that weapon to turn the entire Eleni population into puppets." Plasma fire rippled across the viewscreen, each pulse a searing brand against the void. Thomas leaned closer, his eyes tracing the complex energy signatures spilling from the Krill weapon schematics. Lines of glowing cerulean energy pulsed on the display, a visual representation of the Krill's horrific design. Their empathic amplification. "It's crude," he murmured, more to himself than the bridge crew. "Almost brute force. They're overmodulating the base frequency, creating a feedback loop, a vulnerability." On the planet below, the vulnerability was far from theoretical. The Eleni capital, once a symphony of light and flowing energy, was now a discordant jumble of fear and confusion. Citizens stumbled through the streets, their faces contorted in expressions of vacant compliance. The Krill weapon, a towering spire of obsidian glass, pulsed with malevolent energy, bathing the city in a sickly green glow. Eleni minds, usually vibrant with empathy, were being overwritten, their thoughts and emotions filled with the cold, calculating directives of the Krill hive mind. "Admiral, Krill fighters are swarming sectors 4 through 7, Lieutenant Park reported, her voice tight. "They're anticipating our move to disrupt the signal. We're taking heavy fire." The bridge shuddered as a volley of plasma bolts slammed into the shields. Back on Earth, the Terran Council was in emergency session. Holographic representatives flickered around the massive chamber, their faces etched with concern and in some cases thinly veiled panic. "Admiral Thomas has exceeded his authority," Counselor Valerius declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "His actions are reckless and jeopardize the entire mission." Counselor Jones countered, "He's buying us time. The Krill are on the verge of subjugating an entire species. If we pull Thomas out now, we condemn the Eleni to a fate worse than death." A flashback flickered in Valerius's mind. A younger Thomas, fiery and idealistic, standing before the council, arguing passionately for the rights of pre-spaceflight species. "We have a moral obligation," he declared, "to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The memory faded, replaced by the grim reality of the present. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Park's fingers flew across the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. The reports from the surface were grim. The Krill influence was spreading like a virus, turning the Eleni against themselves. "There has to be something we can do here," she muttered. She pulled up schematics of the Eleni capital, her gaze sweeping over the intricate network of energy conduits and shield generators. Then, her eyes locked onto a section labeled Historical Preservation. A research facility, a diagram for a shield meant to block empathic waves. "We can use our communication array to broadcast a counter-frequency," Thomas announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "Overload their amplification process, disrupt the signal." "The Krill are jamming our transmissions, Admiral," a comms officer replied. "We can't break through." "Then we'll make them think we're breaking through," Thomas said, a spark of steadfast perseverance in his eyes. "Prepare a diversionary attack on their flagship. Draw their fighters away from the communication ships. Give them something else to worry about." The cost was immediate and brutal. 3 Terran destroyers, shields buckling under the relentless Krill fire, peeled off from the main formation, drawing the enemy fighters away. One by one, they succumbed to the overwhelming assault, their hulls breached, their reactors detonating in blinding flashes of light. Meanwhile, on the surface, Park raced through the deserted streets of the capital, Krill drones buzzing overhead. She reached the Historical Preservation Facility, its entrance sealed shut. With a surge of adrenaline, she forced the doors open, revealing a hidden cache of Eleni artifacts, intricately carved crystals, glowing orbs, and ancient devices humming with latent energy. She recognized them, artifacts of connection. Working with frantic speed, Park rerouted power conduits, bypassed security protocols, and integrated the artifacts into the shield generator. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead as she muttered technical incantations, her fingers dancing across the control panel. In moments, the shield generator was online, bathing the facility in a shimmering field of blue energy. The communication ships deployed the counter-frequency, a wave of white noise crashing against the Krill's empathic signal. The effect was immediate but limited. The Krill's control faltered, but only momentarily. The Eleni were still trapped, their minds still vulnerable. Enraged, the Krill turned their full attention to the Dauntless. Plasma bolts hammered against the flagship shields, each impact threatening to tear through the weakened defenses. Alarms blared throughout the ship as fires erupted and bulkheads buckled. "Brace for boarding action," Thomas yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. "They're going to try to take us offline." Just then, a comm signal broke through the chaos. It was Park. "Admiral," her voice was strained but clear. "I've modified a local shield generator. I believe I can amplify the counter signal to achieve a system-wide reset. A pause then, but it will take my life if I am correct. Thomas stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. He could continue his current course, hoping to hold out against the Krill onslaught, or he could gamble everything on Park's plan, a plan that would almost certainly cost her life. Time was running out. He had to decide. Divert all available power to the surface shields. Lieutenant, give Park everything she needs, Thomas barked, his voice echoing across the bridge. He trusted Park. He had to. The fate of the planet, perhaps the system, rested on her shoulders. The bridge, typically a scene of calm efficiency, transformed into a war room. Red alert klaxons blared, casting long shadows as the crew scrambled to their stations. Brace for boarding action. A voice yelled over the comms. Plasma rifles were unlocked from their racks, and energy shields flickered to life, sectioning off corridors. Every able-bodied crew member, from navigators to comms officers, prepared to defend their ship with their lives. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Park and her small team reached the artifact cache. The structure loomed before them, an obsidian monolith etched with swirling patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. It exuded an aura of ancient power, a silent testament to a civilization long gone. "Shield generator located," reported Jones, his voice tight with anticipation. "But it's offline, and I'm not reading any standard power conduits." Park ran a diagnostic scan, her brow furrowing. "The generator requires a unique energy source," she announced. "Something I'm only detecting deep within the cache. Damn it." As they ventured deeper, the air grew thick with an almost palpable energy. Suddenly, laser grids snapped into existence, blocking their path. Automated turrets, sleek and deadly, emerged from the walls, their targeting sensors locking onto Park's team. "Defense systems active," shouted Miller, diving for cover. "Take them out." "Hold your fire," Park commanded, her mind racing. She recognized the energy signatures, a complex weave of Eleni technology and something far older, far more sophisticated. These aren't designed to kill, just to deter. There's a sequence, a harmonic resonance. Working feverishly, Park tapped into the system's control matrix, her fingers flying across her wrist-mounted console. Lines of code cascaded down the screen as she deciphered the ancient Eleni protocols. With a final keystroke, she bypassed the defense systems. The laser grids dissipated, and the turrets retracted back into the walls. Back on the flagship, chaos reigned. The Krill boarding party had breached the outer defenses, and the corridors echoed with the sounds of plasma fire and guttural roars. Krill warriors, their chitinous armor glistening with malevolent energy, advanced relentlessly, their eyes burning with cold, calculating rage. "They're in Sector 4, reported a frantic voice. "Heavy casualties." Thomas, plasma rifle in hand, led the defense. "Hold the line," he roared, unleashing a volley of plasma bolts. The bridge crew fought with desperate courage, each member knowing that the fate of their species hung in the balance. But the Krill were relentless, their superior strength and technology pushing the defenders back. Suddenly, the comms panel flashed. "Incoming message from the Terran Council." "Put them through," Thomas growled, firing another burst at a charging Krill warrior. The holographic image of Counselor Valerius materialized, his face etched with disapproval. "Admiral Thomas, we are receiving reports of unconventional activity. Explain yourself." "We're a little busy here, Counselor," Thomas snapped, deflecting a plasma blast with his energy shield. "Park is on the surface, attempting to disrupt the Krill's empathic link. I'm giving her the time she needs." Valerius's face darkened. "You are exceeding your authority, Admiral." "Stand down immediately." "Negative," Thomas replied, his voice firm. "I believe in her plan, and I believe in humanity's ability to adapt. We're not giving up. Not now, not ever." On the surface, Park had finally located the energy source, a crystalline matrix pulsating with raw power. "Got it," she breathed, carefully extracting the matrix and placing it into a specialized containment unit. Now to amplify this counter frequency. With the energy source secured, Park began the process of integrating it into the modified shield generator. The machine hummed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie blue glow. As she activated the generator, a powerful surge of energy erupted from the device, arcing across the chamber and into the surrounding atmosphere. Across the city, Krill warriors staggered, clutching their heads in confusion. Their empathic link to the hive mind flickered and died, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. But the effect was temporary. The Krill, driven by their unwavering will, quickly regained their composure and redirected their forces towards the source of the disruption. Admiral, Park's voice crackled over the comms, amplification complete. The counter frequency is spreading, but there might be side effects I'm detecting. Unstable energy fluctuations. Before Thomas could respond, the shield generator overloaded. A blinding flash of light engulfed the chamber, followed by a deafening roar. The energy pulse ripped outwards, consuming everything in its path. Buildings crumbled, vehicles vaporized, and the very air crackled with raw power. The Krill ground forces, caught in the blast, were momentarily incapacitated, their bodies convulsing as the empathic disruption reached its peak. But even in the face of such devastating energy, their resilience was evident. They would adapt. They always did. The counter-frequency began to spread across the Eleni system, a wave of disruption rippling through the Krill's collective consciousness. But it was not a complete solution. It merely weakened their control, sowing chaos and confusion but failing to sever the link entirely. On the flagship, the Krill boarding party was pushed back to the forward decks, but they continued to advance, driven by their insatiable hunger. Thomas, fighting alongside his crew, took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, his armor failing to absorb the full impact. He staggered but refused to fall, his eyes burning with defiance. Then silence. Park's transmission cut off abruptly. Park. Park, do you read? Thomas shouted into the comms, his voice permeated with desperation, but there was no response. The view screen flickered to life, displaying a chilling image, the Krill fleet massing for a final, decisive assault. And then a voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed across the bridge. Humanity, the Krill leader intoned, will learn the true meaning of despair. The bridge of the Indomitable bucked violently. Alarms shrieked, a discordant symphony of impending doom. Red emergency lights strobed across the faces of the remaining bridge crew, painting them in hues of blood and panic. The acrid smell of ozone and burning metal filled the air, stinging Thomas's nostrils. They're through Sector 4. A young ensign screamed, his voice barely audible above the din. Thomas, a jagged piece of shrapnel protruding from his left thigh, gripped the command console, his squeezing hard. Blood soaked through his uniform, pooling on the deck. Seal it off. Divert power to the energy shields. He winced as he shifted his weight, the pain a searing brand on his consciousness. Report. Krill boarding party gaining ground, Admiral. Another officer yelled. They're adapting to our defensive measures. Damn it, Thomas roared. Medical team, I need an assessment. A medic, her face streaked with grime and sweat, scrambled to his side. She shone a light into his eyes, her expression grim. Admiral, you've lost a lot of blood. The shrapnel's nicked a major artery. It's serious but not immediately life-threatening. You need surgery now. Thomas waved her away, his eyes sharp. Later, seal that breach. We lose the bridge, we lose the ship. The Krill will not pass. He focused on the tactical display, his mind racing, calculating probabilities, assessing weaknesses. He couldn't afford to think about the pain, about the blood, about the fact that he might be dying. The Indomitable, the Eleni, the entire sector depended on him. Meanwhile, light filtered weakly through the debris. Twisted metal groaned under its own weight. Dust and smoke choked the air, making it difficult to see, to breathe. Lieutenant Park coughed, spitting out a mouthful of grit. Her head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache. She pushed herself up, her left arm screaming in protest. The explosion had thrown her clear, but the landing had been brutal. "Report," she croaked, her voice hoarse. "Silence. Anyone, report." She crawled over the rubble, her vision blurring. The bodies of her team lay scattered around her, some motionless, others twitching in agony. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sickly sweet smell of burning flesh. "Jackson, Ramirez," she called out, her voice cracking with fear, a groan. She scrambled towards the sound, finding Ramirez pinned beneath a collapsed support beam, his face pale and contorted with pain. "Park, thank God," he whispered. "Hang on," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll get you out." She tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. Damn it. She pulled out her comm unit, her fingers fumbling with the controls. "This is Park to Indomitable, do you read? We need immediate evac. Casualties, heavy casualties. Static. Thomas, do you read me?" After a moment of silence, a burst of static filled the comms, followed by a fragmented, distorted voice. "Park, situation, critical, unable, assist. Hold your ground." The transmission cut out. Park stared at the comm unit, her heart sinking. They were on their own. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Ramirez, stay with me. I'll find a way to get you out." She began to assess the situation, her mind racing, searching for a solution. Some of her team were dead, others were severely wounded, and she saw signs that some were missing, presumed captured by the Krill. Light years away, in the sterile halls of the Terran Council chambers, chaos reigned. Holographic projections flickered erratically, displaying images of the damaged Indomitable and the devastated Eleni homeworld. The news of the energy pulse and the heavy losses had sent shockwaves through the council. "This is a disaster," Councillor Varga shouted, his face red with anger. "Thomas has failed. He disobeyed direct orders. We need to relieve him of command immediately and order a full retreat." "I second that," Councillor Jones added. "This mission is a lost cause. We're throwing good resources after bad. The Eleni are doomed. We can't afford to sacrifice our own people for a lost cause." A minority faction, led by the pragmatic Councillor Ito, pushed back against the tide of panic. "We can't abandon the Eleni now," Ito argued. "They're a valuable strategic asset. If we pull out, we'll lose their trust, and we'll be sending a message to the entire galaxy that humanity can't be relied upon. The Krill are a threat to everyone. We must stand our ground." Back on the bridge of the Indomitable, the situation had deteriorated further. The Krill boarding party had breached the inner defenses, pouring into the bridge in a relentless wave. Thomas and the remaining bridge crew fought back to back, their weapons spitting streams of energy, cutting down Krill warriors with each shot. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. Shields failing. An officer screamed as an explosion rocked the bridge, sending debris flying. Thomas grunted, firing his sidearm at a Krill warrior who was charging towards him. The warrior crumpled to the ground, but another took his place. They were relentless, tireless, driven by a fanatical devotion to their cause. Suddenly, the Krill began employing a new tactic. They pushed forward, using captured Terran personnel as human shields. The hostages, their faces pale with terror, were forced to walk ahead of the Krill warriors, their bodies absorbing the energy blasts meant for their captors. "Hold your fire," Thomas bellowed, his voice strained. "Don't shoot, they're using hostages." The bridge crew hesitated, their weapons wavering. How could they fire when innocent lives were at stake? The Krill pressed their advantage, advancing closer and closer to the command console. On the planet's surface, Park was analyzing data from a salvaged Krill comm unit when she made a disturbing discovery. "They're adapting," she exclaimed. "The Krill are developing specialized shielding for their troops that are resistant to the counter frequency. The frequency is still effective, but they're not as vulnerable as before." Park realized that the counter frequency alone wouldn't be enough to defeat the Krill. They needed a new strategy, a new weapon, something that could break through the Krill's defenses. Suddenly, A message blared over the comms, overriding all other channels. It was the Krill leader, his voice cold and metallic. "Admiral Thomas, this is Krill Commander Ithorian. We have your Lieutenant Park. We propose a ceasefire. Surrender Park to us and we will spare your ship and your crew." Thomas froze, his heart pounding. He had a duty to protect his crew, to defend the Indomitable. But he also had a commitment to the Eleni, to Park, to the principles of justice and freedom. Could he sacrifice one life to save many? As Thomas hesitated, a high-pitched whine filled the bridge. The Krill had deployed a sonic weapon, a device that emitted a focused beam of intense sound, capable of shattering metal and bone. The bridge's defenses buckled and cracked. The viewport spiderwebbed. The air vibrated with unbearable intensity. "Admiral, we can't hold." An officer screamed, clutching his ears. "We're losing atmosphere." Thomas knew he had to make a decision, and he had to make it now. "Commander Ithorian," he said, his voice echoing across the bridge, "I accept your offer. I will meet with you." The escort was silent. 4 Krill soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh, flickering lights of the corridor, flanked Thomas. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of Krill biology and the undercurrent of ozone from their energy weapons. Each step echoed unnervingly in the confined space, a rhythmic countdown to the inevitable parley. In the makeshift lab, carved out of a storage bay, Park squinted at the holographic display. Lines of complex energy signatures danced before her eyes, a chaotic ballet of frequencies and wavelengths. "Damn it," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "They're shielding. It's like nothing we've ever seen. It adapts." Light years away, the Terran Council chamber was a cacophony of raised voices and conflicting opinions. "We're throwing good resources after bad," Counselor Ramirez bellowed, his image flickering with static. "The Eleni are a lost cause." Counselor Jones countered, her voice sharp. "We gave our word. Are we now a species that abandons its allies?" The debate raged, a predictable stalemate. The doors hissed open, revealing a large chamber. At the far end, seated on a raised dais, was the Krill leader. He wasn't the hulking brute Thomas had expected. Instead, he was lean, almost elegant, with eyes that glinted with cold intelligence. "Admiral Thomas," the Krill leader said, his voice a modulated rasp. "Welcome, I am Krell." "I think I've got something," Park announced, her voice tight with excitement. "A frequency. A harmonic resonance. It's like a tiny crack in their armor, but..." She trailed off, her face falling. "Our standard weapons can't exploit it, it's too specific." Back in the council chamber, a compromise was forming, ugly and pragmatic. "A smaller team," Counselor Ramirez conceded. "A covert operation. We send them in to assist Thomas, gather intelligence. But the main fleet remains on standby, ready to disengage if necessary." Krell leaned forward, his gaze intense. "The Eleni," he said, "possess a unique technology, a resonance matrix. It is unsettling, disruptive to the natural order." Park stared at the salvaged Krill weaponry scattered across her workbench. "If I could just repurpose their disruptor tech. Combine it with the Eleni frequency data. Maybe, just maybe." Aboard the stealth frigate Shadowstrike, Captain Eva Rostova addressed her team. Her voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to the adrenaline thrumming in her veins. "Our mission: infiltrate the Krill perimeter, link up with Admiral Thomas and Lieutenant Park. We are ghosts. We leave no trace." Krell steepled his fingers, his black eyes boring into Thomas. "I offer you a deal, Admiral. Surrender the Eleni technology. In return, we will spare your fleet. We will leave the Eleni to their fate." Park fired the makeshift weapon. A beam of violet energy lanced across the bay, striking a test plate of Krill armor. The armor shimmered, buckled, then cracked. "It works!" Park exclaimed, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "But the range? It's barely a few meters." The shadow strike pierced the atmosphere of the planet, hugging the terrain, a dark wraith skimming across the alien landscape. Rostova's voice crackled over the comms. "Touchdown confirmed. proceeding to designated coordinates. Thomas met Krell's gaze, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. Why are they so fixated on this technology? What are they really planning? Park and the Shadow Strike team huddled over a holographic map, plotting their course. The main Krill base is our target, Park said, pointing to a heavily fortified complex. We use the disruptor to punch a hole in their defenses. Rostova's team goes in, secures the perimeter. Simple. Krell leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You've lost so many, haven't you, Admiral? Civilians under your command. Can you afford to make the same mistake again? Are these Eleni worth the cost? As Rostova's team advanced through a maze of tunnels, they stumbled upon a hidden laboratory. The scene within was horrifying. Captured Eleni strapped to tables, subjected to cruel experiments. Their bodies were hooked up to grotesque machines, their minds probed and violated. Thomas straightened his shoulders, his voice firm. I have a counter-offer. We will share a modified version of the Eleni technology, for humanitarian purposes only. To heal, not to destroy. Suddenly, the tunnels erupted in a hail of laser fire. Krill soldiers swarmed from the shadows, their weapons spitting emerald bolts of energy. Rostova's team returned fire, their pulse rifles barking in the confined space. Krell's eyes narrowed, his voice infused with contempt. Humanitarian purposes. You are naive, Admiral. We will use the Eleni technology to conquer. To bring order to the chaos of the galaxy. To build an empire that will last for millennia. Thomas's hand tightened on the armrest of his chair. He activated a hidden switch beneath the console. A coded signal, a desperate plea, shot out into the void. A distress beacon. Then we have nothing left to discuss, he said, his voice cold and resolute. The signal screamed into the silent void, a call to arms. The energy blasts whizzed past, scorching the durasteel plating of their makeshift cover. Lieutenant Park barked orders, her voice tight with urgency. Miller, suppressive fire. Jones, cover me, I'm moving up. The whine of Krill energy weapons intensified. Casings ejected from their rifles, clattering against the metal floor. They were pinned, the Krill ambushers relentless. Casualties were mounting. One of Park's team lay motionless, a smoking hole in his chest plate, but they held. A guttural voice echoed through the comms, imbued with static. Admiral Thomas, you have activated a distress beacon. Explain yourself. The Krill leader. Thomas met the Krill leader's gaze, his face impassive. The Krill was a hulking monstrosity, its chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh interrogation lights. It ensures my untimely demise is noted. A futile gesture, I grow impatient. We have acquired several Eleni. Deactivate the beacon or they will suffer the consequences. A holographic image flickered to life, displaying a group of terrified Eleni huddled in a holding cell. Park, hearing the exchange through her comm, cursed under her breath. Damn it, Thomas, what are you doing? Jones now, Park yelled. She tossed a smoke grenade, the hiss and pop filling the corridor with opaque gray. Move, move, move. Under cover of the smoke, a small group broke from the main force, disappearing into a side passage to flank the Krill position. Thomas stared into the Krill leader's multifaceted eyes. I do not respond to threats. You will kill them regardless. It is your nature. A calculated risk. He had to call their bluff. In the holding cell, Aurora felt a wave of despair wash over the other Eleni. The Krill's duplicity was a suffocating presence. But even as her own hope faltered, she projected a sense of calm, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. We must remain resilient, she whispered, her voice strained. Their darkness will not consume us. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Eva Rostova, a woman whose resolute expression could melt titanium, received the garbled distress signal. Admiral Thomas is in trouble, she stated flatly, her voice betraying no emotion. Prepare an immediate deployment. I want an advanced squad planetside within 5 minutes. The flanking maneuver worked. The small team, led by Corporal Reyes, burst from the side passage, catching the Krill ambushers by surprise. Energy weapons roared and the Krill formation buckled, allowing Park's team to push forward. "You believe me predictable, Krill," Thomas said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I anticipated your theatrics. The Eleni are already secure." A pre-recorded message played on the Krill comm system, showing a heavily armed security team escorting the Eleni captives to a hidden escape shuttle, a contingency he'd arranged before the negotiations began. The Krill leader roared, its mandibles clicking in fury. "Kill them! Kill them all!" The interrogation room doors slammed open, and Krill soldiers flooded in, energy weapons blazing. The negotiation site had become a war zone. Inside the holding cell, the Eleni desperately tried to use their empathic abilities to soothe each other, to create a unified front against the Krill's aggression. But a dampening field, a technological blocker, was in place, preventing them from connecting, amplifying their fear and isolation. Park's team reached the entrance to the Krill base, a heavily fortified doorway guarded by automated turrets and Krill soldiers. Explosions rocked the corridor as they exchanged fire. The rescue fleet's advanced squad, a team of 4 heavily armed Marines, materialized near the negotiation site, their arrival a burst of controlled chaos. They engaged the Krill forces, drawing their attention away from Thomas and Park's team. Taking advantage of the distraction, Thomas shoved a Krill soldier into a control panel, shorting out the system and plunging the room into darkness. He sprinted for the exit, hoping to link up with Park's team. "Report," Park screamed over the comms. "We're pinned down, need a breach." Reyes rummaged through his pack, pulling out a section of salvaged Krill energy weapon. "Got it, Lieutenant. Stand back." He jury-rigged the weapon, overloading its power core. With a deafening roar, the weapon fired, blasting a jagged hole through the Krill shielding. "Breach is open. Let's go." The Krill leader, observing the chaos on the security monitors, snarled. "Deploy the nullifiers. Eliminate the Eleni presence." Specialized Krill units equipped with devices designed to disrupt and neutralize Eleni empathic abilities moved towards the holding cells. The stakes had just been raised. Aboard the Dauntless, Captain Rostova gave the order. "All units, execute Operation Silent Hammer. Stealth protocols engaged." The rescue fleet, cloaked in advanced stealth technology, began its approach to the planet. Thomas rounded a corner and slammed into 2 Krill soldiers. His sidearm was gone. He was forced into hand-to-hand combat, his movements a blur of strikes and blocks, years of training taking over. Park's team stormed into the holding cell area, only to be met by a wall of Krill soldiers. The Eleni were within reach but heavily guarded. In the holding cell, a Krill soldier raised his weapon, aiming at a group of terrified Eleni. Aurora, despite her own fear, threw herself in front of them, shielding them from the blast. An energy bolt seared across her shoulder, sending her crashing to the floor, a searing pain ripping through her. The corridor reeked of antiseptic and something else, something biological and deeply unsettling. Twisted metal latticework lined the walls, pulsing faintly with a sickly green light. Park tightened her grip on her pulse rifle, motioning for her team to advance. Each step echoed unnaturally in the confined space. They passed a series of chambers, each containing grotesque experiments. Eleni limbs grafted onto Krill drones, pulsating organs suspended in nutrient fluid, and other unimaginable horrors. Ahead, the metallic clang of Krill boots against the deck plates. "Contact," Reyes hissed, leveling his weapon. Thomas, his senses honed from years of combat, anticipated the Krill patrol's movements. He ducked into a side passage, its walls slick with a viscous fluid. He knew these Krill favored a predictable, sweeping pattern. He waited, adrenaline coursing through his veins, until the patrol rounded the corner. 3 Krill soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the dim light. He activated a magnetic detonator he'd scavenged earlier, slapping it onto the wall just as the Krill passed. The explosion rocked the corridor, sending the soldiers sprawling. He finished them off with a burst from his pulse pistol, then vanished back into the shadows. "Sir, we have a problem," Captain Eva Rostova's voice crackled over Thomas's comm. "The Krill have deployed advanced sensor jammers. Our stealth profile is compromised. We're going loud." Rostova's tone was grim. "Damn it," she thought. This op was already a knife's edge. Now we're swinging a damn axe. Park's team breached a reinforced door, revealing a hidden research lab. Banks of equipment hummed with impossibly strong energy. Krill scientists, their multifaceted eyes wide with panic, scrambled to destroy data. In the center of the room, a containment field held a lone Eleni, his face contorted in silent agony. Wires snaked from his head, feeding into a complex neural interface. "They're not just blocking their empathy," Jones said, his voice tight with disgust. "They're weaponizing it." Thomas burst into a vast chamber, the air thick with ozone. In the center, an Eleni scientist lay slumped against a console, his robe stained crimson. "Humans." "You came," the scientist rasped, clutching a data crystal. "The shields, energy frequency, harmonic resonance, disrupt the field." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Injured, need help." Outside, the rescue fleet engaged the main Krill forces. Lasers crisscrossed the void, tearing through shields and armor. Explosions blossomed across the hulls of the Krill warships. The human ships, smaller and more agile, danced through the debris field, dodging enemy fire. "We have a choice to make," Park said, her voice echoing in the lab. "We continue to the main holding cells, or we free these Eleni being experimented on." Thomas, supporting the injured scientist, keyed his comm. "Rostova, transmit this data crystal to command. It contains the frequency needed to disrupt the Krill energy shields." He helped the scientist adjust the transmitter. A moment later, the data was sent. On the Krill command ship, the Krill leader slammed a fist against the console. "The humans. They target the shield generators, change strategy, focus fire on the lead ships." "Park, we have a problem," Reyes said. "We need to split up." "I can't leave these prisoners to die." Jones nodded in agreement. "I'll go with Reyes, you find the others." Thomas, still searching for Park's team, stumbled upon an armory. Inside, racks of experimental human weapons lay, gathering dust, plasma rifles, sonic grenades, and other relics from forgotten conflicts. "Looks like the Krill have been collecting trophies," he thought grimly. The rescue fleet, armed with the shield frequency, inflicted heavy damage on the Krill defenses. But the Krill ships, though weakened, continued to fight with savage intensity. Human ships exploded in fiery bursts, their crews lost to the void. "They're moving the prisoners," Jones said over the comm, "to an off-world facility, heavily fortified." Thomas, wielding a captured plasma rifle, stormed into the Krill communication hub. He unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, melting consoles and vaporizing Krill technicians. The hub went silent, its screens flickering and dying. Inside the ventilation shaft, Aurora, her face pale with pain, focused her remaining empathic abilities. "Left, then right. Avoid the thermal vents. They are close." Her voice was barely a whisper. On the command ship, the Krill leader snarled, "Execute the prisoners now." Back on the ship, the captain makes a decision. "Charge the experimental bombs. We are risking the entire planet. Fire when ready." Park's team crawled through the ventilation shaft, the metallic tang of blood filling their nostrils. Ahead, a faint light. The sound of muffled screams. They were close. The first Park team burst through the reinforced door, weapons raised, into a scene of sterile horror. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the rows of transparent cylinders. Within each, an Eleni floated, eyes vacant, tendrils of neural cabling snaking into their skulls. Their skin shimmered with an unnatural luminescence, a side effect of the Krill's tampering. A low, rhythmic hum permeated the chamber, a sound that vibrated in Park's teeth. He could feel a wave of fractured emotions washing over him: fear, pain, and a chilling, alien sense of purpose. The Krill had amplified their empathic abilities, twisted them into weapons. Meanwhile, the second Park team reached the main cell. A shimmering blue force field pulsed with energy, blocking the entrance. Krill's soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming, stood guard, energy rifles trained on the door. "Breaching this will take time," Lieutenant Jones reported, his voice tight, "and attract unwanted attention." A deafening roar echoed through the base. Thomas, wielding the experimental sonic disruptor, unleashed a wave of focused sound against a nearby support structure. The metal groaned and buckled, showering sparks as the structure collapsed, triggering alarms and drawing the Krill's attention like moths to a flame. "That's my invitation," Thomas muttered, adjusting his helmet. Inside the lab, one of the experimented on Eleni, her eyes flickering with a newfound awareness, focused her amplified abilities. A wave of pure empathic energy surged outwards, overloading the Krill tech in the room. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by the sizzle of fried circuits. The force field flickered and died. "Go, now," she telepathed, her voice a whisper in Park's mind. On the bridge of the flagship, Captain Eva Rostova watched the energy readings plummet. "Divert all remaining power to support the EMP," she ordered, her voice grim. "We're running on fumes here, people. Make it count." The ship shuddered as energy reserves were drained, leaving them dangerously vulnerable. Back in the tunnels, Thomas worked frantically, rerouting power conduits on the experimental weapon. "Almost there," he grunted, sweat dripping from his brow. "Just need to bypass the safety failsafe. This is going to be messy." The weapon sputtered, emitting a high-pitched whine. A chilling announcement blared over the base's comm system. "Bioweapon release initiated. Sector Gamma. Lockdown enforced." The Krill leader's voice was cold and devoid of emotion. The experimented on Eleni, weakened but resolute, focused their remaining energy. A shimmering barrier materialized around the bioweapon containment unit, sealing it off from the rest of the base. "We can hold it," one of them projected, her voice fading. "But not for long. Save the others." The barrier pulsed with light, then flickered and died, the Eleni collapsing into lifeless husks. On the bridge, the sensors blared. "Biohazard detected. Sector Gamma. Containment breach imminent." Thomas hit his fist on the activation switch. The modified weapon roared to life, unleashing a concentrated beam of energy that sliced through the base's outer defenses. The air crackled with ozone and the ground trembled. "Breach created," he yelled into his comm. "But it's unstable, get them out now." Park's team, now reunited with the freed Eleni, sprinted towards the exit point, weapons blazing. Krill's soldiers emerged from the shadows, firing blindly. Energy blasts whizzed past, tearing chunks out of the walls. They were cut off. The Krill leader, a hulking figure in ornate armor, stepped into view, flanked by his elite guard. Thomas, despite a gash across his arm and a limp in his stride, charged towards the Krill leader, drawing his plasma pistol. "Go," he roared. "I'll hold them." He fired, the plasma bolts searing through the air. Aurora, sensing Thomas's pain and purpose, focused her empathic abilities on the Krill leader. A wave of conflicting emotions, doubt, fear, and regret washed over him, momentarily staggering him. But the effort was too much. Aurora crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Park faced a split-second decision. Leave Thomas, a guaranteed death, and save the Eleni, or risk everything by staying. His gut clenched. "Jones, get Aurora to the ship," he barked. "I'm not leaving him." The Krill leader sneered. "You fool. The Eleni are not merely prisoners, they are the key. Their amplified empathic abilities, when properly focused, can unlock the Terran Federation's communication network. We will control your thoughts, your leaders, your entire civilization." Park, Thomas, and the remaining Eleni exchanged grim glances. There was only one option. "We're not letting that happen," Park said, his voice resolute. "Thomas, can you overload the base's systems through that breach?" "It's a suicide run," Thomas replied, "but if it stops them." Working together, they rerouted power conduits, overloading the base's core systems. The ground vibrated violently. Alarms blared. "Get to the ships," Thomas yelled. Now, the sabotage triggered a chain reaction. Explosions ripped through the base, tearing it apart from the inside out. The Krill fleet above scrambled to escape the blast radius. The team sprinted towards the exit point as the base crumbled around them. The remaining ships in the rescue fleet laid down a barrage of covering fire, intercepting incoming Krill fighters. They were pulled from the base seconds before it detonated in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rocked their transport ship, sending them crashing against the walls. Back on the Terran ship, battered but alive, Aurora stirred. She looked at Thomas, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and revelation. "There is something you must know, Admiral, the empathic block. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, it was a choice. The Eleni High Council feared being controlled, so they severed our connection. The Krill, they want to weaponize what we suppressed for so long." The acrid smell of burning metal and singed flesh hung heavy in the air. Twisted wreckage, once part of the Terran base, littered the landscape, a grotesque monument to the Krill's ruthlessness. The moans of the wounded echoed through the ravaged corridors, a symphony of pain that clawed at the soul. Medical teams, their faces smudged with grime and exhaustion, moved with frantic efficiency, triaging the injured. Humans and Eleni lay side by side, their shared suffering transcending the boundaries of species. Medbots zipped between them, injecting painkillers and sealing wounds, their mechanical precision a stark contrast to the raw emotion that permeated the scene. Aurora, her delicate frame trembling with exhaustion, moved among the injured. Her eyes, usually bright with empathy, were clouded with sorrow, yet her touch remained gentle, her presence a soothing balm. She knelt beside a young Terran Marine, his leg mangled and his face contorted in pain. He thrashed, muttering incoherently. Aurora placed a hand on his forehead and a wave of calm washed over him. His muscles relaxed, his breathing evened, and a flicker of peace touched his features. Lieutenant Park approached Thomas, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Admiral, the casualties are significant. We've lost over 60% of our ground forces. The Dauntless took heavy damage and the Valiant is crippled. We're running low on medical supplies and ammunition. Repairs will take time we don't have." Thomas, his arm in a sling and a bandage wrapped around his head, winced as he rose from his makeshift cot. The explosion had rattled him, but his willpower remained unshaken. "The Krill, still out there, Admiral. We're picking up faint energy signatures, but they're cloaked. They could be anywhere." Thomas stared out at the devastation, his face hardened. "We're sitting ducks," he thought grimly, battered, bruised, and vulnerable. Aurora approached, her voice soft but firm. "Admiral, the Krill, they seek more than conquest. They crave control." Thomas turned, his gaze meeting hers. "Control? What are you talking about?" "They want to weaponize our empathic abilities, not just to influence individuals, but to control entire populations. Their plan is to amplify our abilities and use them to exploit a vulnerability in your Terran Federation's communication network. They seek to sow discord, to manipulate your leaders, to turn you against each other." A chill ran down Thomas's spine. The Krill's attack on the Eleni wasn't just a land grab, it was a strategic power play on a galactic scale. "Our comm network, how?" Just then a garbled message crackled over the comm system. It was faint, almost unintelligible, but Park managed to isolate the signal. "Krill, assistance, please." The voice, alien and desperate, faded into static. Park frowned. "Another distress signal, Admiral, from an unknown species. They're under attack by the Krill. Another war," grumbled Lieutenant Jones from across the room. "We can barely hold our own here." "We can't just ignore them," Park countered. "They might be valuable allies, a united front against the Krill." Thomas hesitated, his mind racing. Could the Terran Federation afford to take on another war, especially with its limited resources? But could they afford not to? Aurora stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Admiral, the Krill are a threat to all. If they are not stopped here, they will spread like a plague, consuming everything in their path. You must consider an alliance. What choice do you have? A heated debate erupted among the Terran officers. Some argued for caution, for consolidating their forces and defending their own territory. Others, like Park, advocated for immediate action, for reaching out to the other species and forming a united front. Thomas listened intently, weighing the risks and the potential rewards. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he raised his hand, silencing the debate. "Contact the other species," he ordered, his voice firm. "Establish diplomatic channels, but proceed with caution. We need to know who we're dealing with." He turned to Park. "Prep the fleet for a potential attack. I want every weapon system online." As the Terran officers scrambled to carry out his orders, a chilling realization dawned on Thomas. The Krill hadn't been crippled by the base explosion. They had simply retreated, regrouped, and were now preparing for a final, decisive assault. A new transmission was intercepted, this one clear and chillingly direct. It was a Krill voice, cold and devoid of emotion. "Aurora of the Eleni. Surrender yourself and your people may yet live. Refuse and the Terran Federation will suffer the consequences. We require her unique abilities to control the population. Resistance is futile." The message ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The Krill's intention was clear. They wanted Aurora, and they were willing to destroy everything to get her. The Terran fleet sprang into action, preparing for battle. Remaining fighters were launched, shields were raised, and every weapon system was brought online. Thomas, despite his injuries, made his way to the bridge of the Dauntless, determined to take command. Aurora, her face pale with fear and persistence, approached him. "Admiral, I am responsible for this. If I surrender myself—" "No," Thomas interrupted, his voice firm. "We won't let them take you. You're not just a weapon, Aurora. You're a person, and we will protect you." Park stepped forward, her eyes resolute. "Admiral, I volunteer to lead a team to protect Aurora. She's too important to lose." "It's too reckless," Thomas said, his voice tight. "Aurora, you're too valuable to risk on a stunt like this. The information you provide, your strategic insight, it's irreplaceable." Park stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "Then let me lead a team, Admiral. A volunteer team. We'll adapt her plan, minimize her direct involvement. She can guide us, provide the data, but stay here, relatively safe." Thomas ran a hand over his face, the rasp of stubble audible in the tense silence. He knew Park was right, knew he was clutching at straws, trying to protect the one advantage they had. "Damn it, Maya. Fine. Gather your team, prepare for a covert mission. But you breathe wrong near the Krill fleet and I'm pulling you out." As Park turned to leave, Lieutenant Jones spoke up, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Admiral, with all due respect, are we seriously considering opening negotiations with another alien species, based on a distress signal, from the same sector?" A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. The debate about the Zetharians, the senders of the second distress call, had been simmering for hours. Thomas saw a strategic opening. "We can't afford to ignore any potential allies, Jones. Send a small, cloaked vessel. Establish contact, cautiously. No promises, no commitments, just feelers." He was hedging his bets, playing a dangerous game, but the potential payoff was too significant to ignore. Park moved with brisk efficiency, selecting her team. Lena Fuse Rostova, a demolitions expert with a penchant for the dramatic. Giant Whisper Lee, a stealth specialist whose movements were as silent as his words. And Marcus Tank Johnson, a hulking engineer who trusted machines more than aliens, especially this Aurora. "All right, people," Park said, her voice low but firm. "We've got a job to do. Some of you might have reservations about our Eleni friend. Keep them to yourselves. We're here to do a job, and we do it together." In a darkened briefing room, Aurora projected a holographic schematic of the Krill fleet's command structure. Lines of energy pulsed, revealing intricate communication networks, sensor grids, and power conduits. "This is what I see," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Their thoughts, their plans. I can guide you, but you must be precise. Any deviation will be catastrophic." Fuse Rostova tapped a data pad, a grin flashing across her face. "Imp devices are prepped and ready, Commander. Just point us at the right frequency and we'll scramble their brains." Meanwhile, the cloaked vessel, a modified scout ship named the Silent Dawn, slipped through the void, its sensors focused on the coordinates provided by the Zetharians. A message was transmitted, a carefully worded declaration of peaceful intent and a shared enemy. The response was hesitant, filtered through layers of static and suspicion. "We are the Zetharians," the message crackled. "Outsiders are not welcome, the Krill. They consume all. Why should we trust you?" "Because we both bleed Zetharians," came the reply from the Silent Dawn's comms officer, "and the Krill are coming for both of us." The Zetharians, after a long pause, revealed a chilling truth. The Krill do not merely conquer, they dismantle. They strip planets bare, leaving lifeless husks in their wake. They consume everything. Park's team, aboard a heavily modified transport, the Shadow Walker, approached the Krill fleet. Whisper Lee, his fingers dancing across the sensor controls, spoke softly. "Exploiting a blind spot in their sensor grid, minimal risk of detection. For now." Suddenly, alarms blared on the Silent Dawn. "We're being tracked," the comms officer yelled. "Krill interceptors inbound. They know we're here." A tense chase ensued, the Silent Dawn weaving through a treacherous asteroid field, Krill fighters hot on its tail. On the Shadow Walker, Fuse Rostova armed the EMP devices. "Time to send these bastards a little surprise," she muttered. With a coordinated strike, the devices were deployed, unleashing a wave of electromagnetic energy that washed over the Krill fleet. "EMP deployed," Park announced. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, Aurora gasped, clutching her head. "Now," she cried, her voice strained. "Their communications. They are blind. Strike now." Real-time tactical data poured into the Terran fleet's targeting systems, pinpointing vulnerable Krill warships. A hesitant signal came from the Zetharians. We will provide targeting data, but only for the most critical warships. We cannot risk exposure." Suddenly, alarms wailed on the Shadow Walker. "We've been spotted," Tank Johnson roared. "Krill patrol ship dead ahead." A firefight erupted, laser fire tearing through the cramped corridors of the Shadow Walker. "Split up," Park yelled, returning fire. "Fuse, tank, create a diversion. Whisper with me. We need to get to Aurora." She realized with a sickening jolt that the Krill weren't just interested in disrupting their mission. They were hunting Aurora. Park and Whisper sprinted through the ship, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. They reached Aurora's location just as a Krill boarding party breached the outer door. Krill warriors, clad in black armor, swarmed into the room, weapons raised. Park engaged the Krill in brutal close-quarters combat, her pistol spitting laser fire. Whisper moved with deadly grace, his blades flashing in the dim light. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. A stray blast struck Aurora, sending her crashing to the floor. The Krill were closing in, their eyes fixed on their prize. Park fought with desperate ferocity, but she knew it was a losing battle. The Krill were almost upon them. The blast doors buckled inward, showering sparks. Park, already bleeding from a gash across her temple, shoved Aurora toward a shadowed alcove. "Go, escape pod, Sector Gamma 9, she gasped, each word a ragged effort. "I'll cover you." Aurora hesitated, her large eyes filled with fear. "But no arguments," Park barked, leveling her sidearm. A Krill warrior, all chitinous armor and predatory eyes, surged through the breach. Park fired the pulse rifle, spitting blue energy. The Krill staggered, but more were coming. "Go!" Dragging Aurora along, Park limped through the wreckage-strewn corridor. The air tasted of ozone and burning metal. Reaching the escape pod bay, Park wrestled open the hatch of a concealed pod. "Get in, seal it. I'll set the launch sequence." Aurora clambered inside, her movements clumsy with panic. Park programmed the pod, setting the cloaking device. Use your gift, Aurora. Mask our presence. They can't find you. Aurora nodded, closing her eyes. A faint shimmer enveloped the pod. Park slapped the launch button just as another wave of Krill warriors rounded the corner, weapons blazing. The pod ejected, vanishing into the chaotic space above the planet. Park collapsed against the wall, a crimson stain blooming on her uniform. On the bridge of the Dauntless, alarms blared. "Admiral, we've lost contact with Lieutenant Park's team." Lieutenant Miller reported, his voice tight with anxiety. Thomas's teeth gritted. "Any survivors?" "Negative, sir, but..." "We're receiving a faint distress signal. Escape pod designated Aurora, Sector Gamma 9. Thomas's gaze hardened. "Acknowledge the signal. Prep a Raptor squadron for immediate rescue. High-risk operation. Tell them to expect heavy resistance." He knew the odds were slim, but he couldn't leave them to die. Meanwhile, across the system, the Zetharians, taking advantage of the disrupted Krill communication network, launched a desperate assault on a Krill supply depot orbiting a gas giant. Their sleek fighters swarmed the depot, laser fire crisscrossing the void. But the Krill responded with brutal efficiency. Reinforcements poured in, their heavily armed cruisers tearing through the Zetharian ranks. The Zetharian offensive faltered, then collapsed. Crippled fighters spun helplessly, venting atmosphere into the cold vacuum. "Admiral, the Zetharians are taking heavy losses," Miller reported, his face grim. "They're requesting immediate assistance." Thomas swore under his breath. He needed every ship to defend the Eleni homeworld, but he couldn't abandon the Zetharians. "Divert 2 cruisers to provide tactical support. Tell them to prioritize defensive maneuvers. We can't afford to lose any more ships." As the Terran cruisers peeled off to aid the Zetharians, the Krill launched a coordinated assault on the Eleni energy shield generator, a massive structure humming with power that protected the planet from orbital bombardment. Explosions blossomed across its surface, threatening to overload the system. Inside the escape pod, Aurora shivered despite the recycled air. They want me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Park, wincing with pain, looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "They're not just trying to conquer us," Aurora explained, her eyes wide with fear. "They want to control me, my abilities. They want to use my empathy to break other species." Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. "Warning, intercept course, Krill patrol ship approaching," the pod's computer announced. On the Dauntless, Thomas watched helplessly as the Krill patrol ship intercepted the escape pod. "Damn it, they've been caught." The Krill patrol ship locked onto the pod with a tractor beam, hauling it into its cavernous bay. Krill warriors, weapons raised, swarmed toward the hatch. "It's over," Aurora whispered, tears streaming down her face. Park, despite her injuries, drew her sidearm. "Not yet." The hatch hissed open and the Krill poured inside. Park fired, dropping 2 warriors before they could react. But they were too many. She fought with desperate courage, but the Krill were relentless. Knowing the end was near, Park grabbed Aurora's hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "There's only one way." With a final surge of strength, Park activated the pod's self-destruct sequence. A klaxon blared and red lights flashed. The Krill warriors recoiled in confusion. "What have you done?" One of them snarled. Park smiled grimly. "Bought you a ticket to hell." The escape pod erupted in a blinding flash, incinerating everything within. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Thomas stared in horror at the sensor readings. The escape pod's signal vanished. Utterly. He clenched his fist, his nucleus tightening. "Park." He breathed the name, a choked whisper. He turned to Miller, his eyes burning with renewed commitment. "Helm, set course for the Krill command ship. All weapons fire at will, no quarter given." A transmission came in from the Zetharian command ship. "Admiral Thomas, we have acquired critical intelligence. The Krill command structure. It has a weakness, but we need live Krill to scan." Thomas considered this. "What kind of weakness?" "Their command relays are dependent on a central processor," said the Zetharian. We believe that if we scan live krill, we can hack the signal and use the waves to break through their shields and their chain of command. Thomas paced the bridge, mulling over the information. He needed live krill, and he needed them now. Prepare a plan, he ordered. We're going to lure a krill warship into a trap. Zetharians, I want full coordination. This has to be perfect. As the Terran and Zetharian fleets maneuvered into position, a new and terrifying development unfolded. A massive krill mothership warped into orbit near the planet. It dwarfed even the largest Terran cruisers, and it was broadcasting something. A signal. Aurora screamed. She seized, her body convulsing violently. Her eyes rolled back in her head and foam bubbled from her lips. Aurora, Thomas yelled, rushing to her side. What's happening? The Eleni diplomat thrashed, her body arching. The signal, she choked out. It's overwhelming. The Terran fleet and Zetharian forces engaged the krill warship, laser fire and missile strikes illuminating the void. The battle was fierce and brutal. Terran ships sustained heavy damage, their shields flickering under the relentless krill assault, but they held their ground, fighting with desperate courage. Finally, after a grueling exchange, the Terran and Zetharian forces managed to disable the krill warship's engines, crippling the vessel and containing its crew. Boarding party, prepare to breach, Thomas ordered. We need those krill officers alive. As the boarding party prepared to enter the crippled warship, the signal from the krill mothership intensified. A wave of panic swept through the Eleni population. People screamed and ran in terror. Some collapsed, writhing in agony. On the bridge of the Dauntless, targeting systems flickered erratically. Admiral, our sensors are going haywire, Miller reported. We're losing lock on the krill ships. Aurora, regaining consciousness, her face pale and drawn, gasped. It's a control wave. Designed to suppress our empathy, to break our will. Thomas's eyes narrowed. A control wave, that's why we need a live scan. But you can't, she protested weakly. It will kill me. Thomas hesitated, his face a mask of conflict. Park would have wanted me to do anything I could. With an unbreakable spirit, he activated the signal. The signal overload proved too much. Aurora went limp, her breathing shallow and ragged. Her eyes fluttered closed and she slipped into unconsciousness. The medical team rushed to her side, desperately trying to stabilize her. Thomas stared down at her still form, his heart heavy with guilt. He had made a terrible choice, and he didn't know if it was the right one. The boarding party returned, or what was left of it. The corridor reeked of ozone and krill blood, the air thick with the metallic tang of human casualties. 7 krill officers, bound and sedated, were dragged through the ship, their insectal eyes still burning with defiant hatred. More than a dozen Terran Marines wouldn't be going home. Chief Medical Officer Davies met him at the entrance to the med bay, his face grim. Admiral, Aurora's condition is stable, but I can't sugarcoat this. Prolonged exposure to the krill control wave has caused severe neurological damage. We're doing everything we can, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. Her chances aren't good. Thomas felt a cold fist clench around his heart. He masked it with a curt nod. I want those krill officers in secure containment adjacent to Aurora's ward. I want them alive and I want them analyzed. Admiral, with all due respect, Davies protested, that's putting her at unnecessary risk. Do it, Thomas said, his voice flat, brooking no argument. And get me everything you can on that control wave. Its source, its effects, everything. The scientists worked around the clock, dissecting the krill officers' neural architecture, mapping the insidious pathways of the control wave. The krill themselves were less cooperative. Even under heavy sedation, they spat venomous pronouncements of krill supremacy, their loyalty seemingly unbreakable. The arrival of a holographic transmission from the Zetharian War Council did little to improve the situation. The Zetharian, a hulking insectoid warrior with mandibles that clicked ominously, wasted no time. Admiral Thomas, it rasped, The Krill prisoners are a threat to galactic security. We demand their immediate extradition for interrogation. Thomas met the Zetharian's gaze unflinchingly. With all due respect, Counselor, those prisoners are under my jurisdiction. They will be interrogated, but their fate will be decided by the Terran Council. You misunderstand, human, the Zetharian hissed, its mandibles clicking faster. This is not a request. It is an order. The Krill are our ancient enemies. Justice demands their immediate execution. Justice? Thomas scoffed. Or a convenient way to eliminate potential sources of information. He cut the transmission. The political games were exhausting. He authorized a risky procedure, pushing the boundaries of known science. Using modified Krill technology, they would attempt to tap into the prisoners' minds, to extract their memories and strategic objectives. It was a gamble, a violation of every ethical protocol, but Aurora's life, and perhaps the fate of the Eleni, hung in the balance. The images that flickered across the screen were fragmented, chaotic. Sprawling Krill fleets massing near resource-rich asteroids, coordinates flashing across tactical displays, glimpses of other Eleni colonies ripe for conquest. But one thread ran through it all: control. The Krill sought to control interspecies communication, to silence dissent, to impose their will upon the galaxy. And Aurora, with her unique empathic abilities, was the key to their conquest. If they could weaponize her empathy, they could enslave entire civilizations. Then, a surge in Krill activity lit up the long-range scanners. A concentrated fleet was converging on a remote, uncharted system. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "Report," he barked. "Admiral, we've identified a hidden Eleni research facility in that system," Lieutenant Park's replacement, a young ensign named Reyes, stammered. "They're developing countermeasures to the Krill control wave." "Damn it," Thomas muttered. "They're trying to cut the head off the snake." He knew what he had to do: prepare for a diversionary attack. "We're going to draw the Krill fleet away from that facility, regardless of the cost." The Terran fleet engaged the Krill in a desperate, outnumbered battle. Lasers crisscrossed the void, explosions rocked the ships, and the screams of dying crewmen filled the comms. They bought the Eleni scientists time, but the Terran fleet paid a heavy price. 3 cruisers were crippled, a destroyer was lost, and countless lives were extinguished. Just as the last Krill fighters disengaged, a garbled message crackled over the comms. It was from the Eleni research facility. "Admiral Thomas, Aurora, key, blocking signal, need, brain scans, counter signal." The transmission broke, leaving a static-filled silence. Thomas stared at the console, his mind racing. They needed his brain scans to create a counter signal, to amplify Aurora's empathic abilities and break the Krill's control. But the procedure was untested, potentially devastating. It could shatter his mind, leave him a vegetable. Was he willing to sacrifice his own sanity for the sake of a species he barely knew? He thought of Park, of her unwavering loyalty, her infectious optimism. He thought of Aurora, lying comatose in the med bay, her fate hanging in the balance. He thought of the countless lives that would be lost if the Krill succeeded. "Prepare the neural interface chamber," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Going in." The chamber was cold and sterile, the air humming with terrifying energy. He lay down on the bio bed, the neural interface helmet lowered over his head. As the machine whirred to life, he closed his eyes and focused on clearing his mind, entering a deep meditative state. Then the floodgates opened. Memories, emotions, sensations, all crashed over him in a tidal wave of raw experience. He saw Park's face, contorted in pain as the Krill fighters ripped through her ship. He felt Aurora's terror, the crushing weight of the Krill's control wave. He relived his past failures, the faces of the civilians he couldn't save, the weight of command crushing his soul. He clung to consciousness, fighting to maintain control as his mind was dissected, analyzed, and transmitted across the void. In the med bay, the Eleni scientists worked feverishly, processing the data, refining the counter signal. As the signal strengthened, the krill control wave began to falter, its insidious tendrils retracting from the minds of the Eleni population. Aurora stirred. Her breathing deepened, her eyelids fluttered. A faint tremor ran through her body. Her eyes still did not open. Aurora's eyes snapped open, her irises flickering with a kaleidoscope of colors before settling into their familiar, soft violet. A tremor ran through her slender frame, her hands clenching on the bio bed. The signal, she whispered, her voice raspy. It is working. The counter signal. It weakens them. On the bridge of the Dauntless, a captured krill officer thrashed against his restraints, his mandibles clicking in a frantic rhythm. Sweat beaded on his chitinous brow. "No, obey," he muttered, his normally unwavering gaze flickering with a flicker of defiance. "Must. Resist." But the krill were not idle. Across the Eleni systems, the holographic displays on the Dauntless flickered erratically. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park reported, her voice strained. "Long-range communications are failing. The krill are deploying some kind of jamming technology. It's amplifying their control wave in localized sectors." A wave of nausea slammed into Thomas, a dizzying kaleidoscope of images flooding his mind. Burning cities, the screams of the dying, a child's face contorted in terror. But interwoven with these were flashes of vibrant green forests, the serene calm of Eleni meditation chambers, Aurora's gentle smile. He gripped the edge of the console, his nucleus tightening. It wasn't his memory, it was hers. "Damn it," he growled, pushing the visions aside. "They're trying to isolate us to reinforce their control." He smacked his fist on the console. "What is the source of that jamming signal?" "Multiple sources, Admiral," Park replied, her fingers flying across the console. "But the strongest concentration is emanating from a hidden research facility on the far side of the system. It was not on any of the maps we had before the scan." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "That's it. That's where they're planning to solidify their control, create a device that makes the krill wave permanent. If they succeed, there will be no turning back. All of the Eleni will be slaves." An alarm blared on the bridge. "Admiral," the tactical officer shouted, "we're detecting a large krill force bypassing the diversionary fleet. They're heading straight for the research facility." Aurora, her voice weak but firm, spoke from the comms panel. "Admiral, the jamming technology. It has a vulnerability, a harmonic resonance that disrupts its frequency modulator. It's a complex equation based on chaotic mathematics, and humans are uniquely suited to solve it. My people cannot achieve the type of calculation required." Thomas didn't hesitate. "We hit that facility now. A direct strike would be suicide. We go in quiet." He turned to Lieutenant Park. "Assemble a small team, cloaked vessel. I'm going in with them." "Sir, that's too dangerous." Park protested. "It's necessary," Thomas countered, his voice brooking no argument. "Aurora's coming with me. We disable that jammer, inject the counter signal directly into it, and break their hold on the Eleni. It is the only way." Minutes later, a sleek black vessel detached from the Dauntless, its cloaking device rendering it virtually invisible. Inside, Thomas stood beside Aurora, his hand resting on her arm. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. Aurora nodded, her violet eyes filled with drive. "As I'll ever be." The cloaked vessel glided silently towards the research facility, a colossal structure of black metal that loomed against the backdrop of a gas giant. The facility was heavily guarded, its surface overflowing with weapon emplacements and shielded by a shimmering energy field. "We're detecting multiple layers of security," the pilot reported. "Bypass codes are required to penetrate the shields." Aurora closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. I can sense them," she whispered, her voice strained. "The minds of the krill guards. They hold the codes, but the jamming, it's like static, a wall of noise. I can barely focus." Thomas placed his hands on either side of Aurora's face, his gaze intense. Focus on me, Aurora. Block out the noise. Think of the people you're trying to save. Think of the future you want to create. I am here. I will help you. He focused his own mind, filtering out the chaotic noise, creating a shield around Aurora. He remembered a time when he had to focus solely on a single target, not letting the distractions of the battlefield cloud his mind. He remembered the weight of his decisions and how they affected so many. What do you see? Aurora gasped, her eyes fluttering. A sequence. A pattern. Delta 9 Tango, Echo 7 Foxtrot, Charlie 2 Alpha. The pilot inputted the codes and a section of the energy shield flickered and died. Shields down, he announced, breaching the outer defenses. As the vessel slipped through the gap, alarms blared throughout the research facility. Red lights flashed and the sound of screeching metal echoed through the corridors. We've been detected, the pilot yelled, brace for impact. A squad of Krill's soldiers rounded the corner, their weapons raised. Blue energy bolts ripped through the air, slamming into the vessel's hull. Go, 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 Thomas shouted, grabbing his pulse rifle. He dove out of the vessel, Aurora close behind him. The firefight was intense. Krill's soldiers fell under the barrage of human firepower, but more kept coming. Aurora, caught in the crossfire, cried out as a bolt grazed her shoulder. Aurora! Thomas roared, his voice filled with fury. He spun around, unleashing a hail of plasma fire, cutting down the remaining Krill soldiers. Adrenaline surged through him, his movements fluid and deadly. He would not fail again. Not this time. He scooped Aurora up in his arms, her body limp against his. We're almost there, he said, his voice tight with willpower. Just a little further. They reached the door to the jamming device, a massive portal of reinforced steel. But as they approached, they saw it was protected by a shimmering, impenetrable energy shield. Damn it, Thomas hissed. Another shield. What frequency do we need to disable it? 7.32 Hertz. Aurora gasped, her skin slick with sweat. The Krill minds, they are so loud. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm Thomas. Krill minds, he focused, drawing on every ounce of training, every moment of disciplined control. It was like standing in a hurricane of static, a cacophony of alien thoughts, desires, and directives crashing against his skull. He imagined a dam, a bulwark against the psychic tide, filtering, blocking, silencing. Focus. The frequency, help her. He pushed the chaos back, a silent scream against an overwhelming force. The chaotic noise began to settle like dust falling in water. I've got it. Clear now, transmit. Aurora nodded, her eyes squeezed shut. She extended a trembling hand, touching the device's control panel. A pulse of energy shot out, invisible but palpable, rippling through the chamber. The humming of the energy shield faltered, flickered, then vanished entirely. Now, Thomas barked, already moving. He ripped a panel off the jamming device, exposing a tangle of wires and glowing components. The air crackled with residual energy. He grabbed a multi-tool from his belt, selecting a cutting attachment. Sparks flew as he severed connections, isolating a central, pulsating crystal. He yanked it free. The device sputtered, then died, plunging that section of the room into near silence. The control wave was disrupted, still there but weaker, fragmented, like a broken radio signal. A klaxon blared. Red lights flashed. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Krill reinforcements. The chamber doors hissed open, and a squad of Krill soldiers marched in, led by a Krill commander. This one was different, larger, its carapace adorned with intricate patterns of glowing runes. Its eyes burned with an unnatural intensity. The commander scanned the room, its gaze locking onto Aurora. A wave of raw, malevolent intent slammed into Thomas. He barely had time to react. The Krill commander launched a psychic assault, a focused beam of mind control energy aimed directly at Aurora. Thomas threw himself in front of her, intercepting the attack. Agony. It was like being plunged into ice water, then set on fire. Alien thoughts flooded his mind, a torrent of directives, desires, and fears. He saw through the Krill commander's eyes. The relentless drive for expansion, the cold, calculating logic of the collective, the utter disdain for individuality. He felt the commander's hunger, its need to dominate, to control. His own memories, his own sense of self began to fray, to unravel. He saw his past failures, the faces of the dead, the weight of command. The Krill influence was a corrosive acid, eating away at H-number soul. No, he fought back not with weapons but with will. He clung to his identity, to the memories of his family, his friends, his crew. He remembered the oath he swore, the lives he was sworn to protect. He was Tyler Thomas, admiral in the Terran fleet, and he would not be broken. The psychic assault intensified. He felt his mind teetering on the edge of oblivion. "Tyler," Aurora cried, her voice imbued with fear. I sensed something. Within the commander's mind. A resistance. A flicker of individuality. She was right. Beneath the layers of Krill conditioning, Thomas detected a faint spark of rebellion, a suppressed longing for freedom. And he knew deep down that the Krill officers they had captured were reasserting their own individuality. An idea sparked in his mind, desperate and dangerous. "The crystal," he gasped, fighting to maintain control. "The core component. We can use it." To amplify the signal, broadcast it directly into their network. Aurora understood instantly. It's risky, it could overload their minds. And ours. We don't have a choice. Thomas staggered to his feet, grabbing the crystal. "Help me recalibrate the device." Working frantically, they reconnected the crystal to the damaged jamming device, rerouting its power flow. Thomas adjusted the frequency settings, focusing the energy into a narrow beam. The device hummed, then pulsed with a blinding light. "Ready," he said, his voice strained. "Target the commander." Aurora focused her empathic abilities, amplifying the counter-signal, directing it towards the Krill commander's mind. Thomas triggered the device. A wave of energy erupted from the crystal, slamming into the Krill commander like a physical blow. The commander staggered back, clutching its head. Its eyes widened in horror as the counter-signal ripped through its mental defenses, disrupting its connection to the Krill collective. The effect was immediate. The commander's control faltered. The runes on its carapace flickered and died. It screamed, a raw, animalistic sound, then collapsed to the floor, twitching uncontrollably. The remaining Krill soldiers in the chamber froze, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Their eyes darted around in confusion. The hive mind, their source of strength and direction, had been severed. "Now!" Thomas yelled. He grabbed Aurora's arm and pulled her towards the door. "We have to get out of here." They sprinted down the corridor, leaving the incapacitated Krill soldiers behind. As they rounded a corner, they saw a holographic display showing a map of the research facility. Red dots pulsed ominously. "That device," Aurora said, pointing to a marker on the map. "It was only one of several. There's a main control center. We have to reach it." A surge of Krill reinforcements was heading toward their location, including new types of Krill drones equipped with enhanced mental shielding. Thomas leaned against the wall, panting. His body ached, his mind blown from the psychic assault. Aurora was pale and exhausted, her empathic abilities strained to their limit. "We can't win this," Aurora said, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to retreat." Thomas looked at the map, then at Aurora. He then looked at the core component in his hand. "The signal is temporary. The fleet needs to be ready to send a secondary wave when this is done." He didn't answer her. The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. Retreat, or continue the mission knowing the odds were stacked against them? Continue. There was no other choice. Retreat meant condemning the Eleni, and Thomas couldn't stomach another failure. He pushed the thought of past mistakes aside, focusing on the present. "We're going in," he said, his voice low but firm. "Aurora, stay close." They moved through the facility with practiced stealth, hugging the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the strange, porous metal that comprised the floor. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of krill ichor and the faint, acrid smell of ozone. Corridors branched in disorienting patterns. illuminated by pulsating violet lights that cast long, dancing shadows. Around a bend, two krill drones materialized, their multifaceted eyes glowing with cold intelligence. These weren't the same mindless automatons they'd encountered before. A faint psionic hum radiated from them, a mental shield that deflected Aurora's probing thoughts like a stone wall. Thomas cursed silently. Direct psychic assault was useless. He raised his pulse rifle, its familiar weight comforting in his hands. An idea sparked. He knelt, quickly rerouting power conduits, adjusting the frequency modulator. "Stand back," he muttered. "Let's see if they like a little static." He fired. The modified pulse rifle emitted a high-pitched whine as it discharged, the energy bolt shimmering with unstable power. The krill drone jerked violently, its movements spasming before collapsing in a heap of twisted metal and sparking wires. The other drone fared no better. Thomas's improvised disruption frequency had found a weakness in their shielding design. Aurora placed a hand on his arm, her expression troubled. "I sense suffering. A group of Eleni. They are close, held captive." Thomas hesitated. Their primary objective was the control center, disabling the krill influence, but the thought of leaving other sentients to suffer. How many? Several scientists, I believe, forced to assist the krill. He made his decision. "We can't leave them. It'll delay us, but it could weaken the collective. Let's move." They followed Aurora's guidance, navigating the labyrinthine corridors until they reached a heavily reinforced door. Surprisingly, there were no guards. The krill's focus was on external threats, not internal security. Thomas overrode the locking mechanism with a few deft movements, and the door hissed open. Inside, a dozen Eleni scientists huddled in a cramped, dimly lit chamber. Their eyes widened in fear as Thomas and Aurora entered, but relief quickly replaced the apprehension. One of the Eleni, a female with intricate tattoos adorning her face, stepped forward. "You are rescuers." Her voice was weak but filled with hope. "Terran Fleet," Thomas replied. "We're here to help. We need to reach the main control center." The Eleni scientist nodded. "We know its location. It is heavily guarded, shielded by multiple layers of energy fields and a powerful psychic barrier." She paused, then added, "But we also know its weakness. The control center is directly above these holding cells. The shields are thinnest on this side of the facility." Thomas felt a surge of adrenaline. Thinnest how? The krill prioritized shielding the main entrances. They didn't expect an attack from within. An idea began to form in Thomas's mind. "Aurora, can these scientists project a false signal, mimic a security breach?" Aurora nodded. Collectively, yes, they could create a significant diversion. Thomas turned to the Eleni scientists. "I need you to create a distraction. Draw the krill forces away from the main entrance. At the same time, send a burst to the fleet as we discussed." He paused, his gaze hardening. "It's a risk. They'll know you're here." The lead scientist met his gaze, tenacity hardening her features. "We understand. It is a risk we are willing to take." The Eleni scientists closed their eyes, their bodies swaying slightly as they linked minds. A low hum filled the chamber, the air crackling with psychic energy. Outside, alarms blared as the krill collective responded to the fabricated security breach. "Now," Thomas said, gripping his pulse rifle. "Let's move." They slipped out of the holding area and into the chaos, using the diversion as cover. The corridors were now swarming with krill drones, their multifaceted eyes darting about in confusion. They reached a critical access point, a narrow corridor guarded by a patrol of 4 krill drones. Thomas raised his modified pulse rifle and fired. The first bolt slammed into the lead drone, sending it crashing to the ground. The others reacted instantly, their weapons spitting violet energy bolts. Thomas and Aurora dove for cover, the air around them sizzling with deflected fire. Thomas risked another shot, disabling a second drone, but as he fired, he noticed something disturbing. The shielding on the remaining drones seemed to be Adapting. The energy bolts were less effective, the drones shaking off the impacts with increasing ease. "They're learning," Thomas growled, reloading his rifle. "Their shields are adjusting to the frequency." They pressed forward, pushing through the corridor, finally clearing the access point. As they rounded a corner, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. Inside, a scene of brutal conflict unfolded. Krill officers, their bodies scarred and twisted, fought against drones still loyal to the hive mind. Ichor splattered across the walls, the air thick with the stench of death. These were the Krill officers from the medical bay, the ones who had begun to reassert their individual identities. They were openly rebelling against the collective. One of the officers, its multifaceted eyes burning with fierce intelligence, turned towards them, sensing Aurora's presence. "Eleni," it rasped, its voice a guttural snarl. "And, Terran, we can assist you. We know the control center's weaknesses, its internal security systems." Thomas eyed the Krill officer warily. "Why should we trust you? We are no longer part of the collective. We seek to destroy it. We can provide a path to the center." The Krill officer gestured towards a hidden passage, "But the path leads directly into the center. There is no place to position the transmitter." "Another distress signal," Lieutenant Park announced, her voice flat. "Eleni, designating themselves as Aurora, pleading for assistance against the Krill, again." Admiral Thomas didn't bother looking up from his datapad, his gaze fixed on the swirling nebula displayed on the main screen. Purple and gold danced in a silent ballet, a stark contrast to the chaos those colors often represented. "Decline it." Park hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. "Admiral, they're classifying it as a Code Crimson. System-wide collapse imminent." Thomas finally raised his head, his eyes, the color of weathered steel, narrowed slightly. "Crimson, huh? They're getting dramatic. Still decline it, Park. I'm sure the Council has already debated this into oblivion. We're not a charity, we're a deterrent." He returned his gaze to the nebula, the vibrant colors doing little to penetrate the weariness etched on his face. "With all due respect, sir," Park pressed, her voice carefully neutral, "this is the third such plea this cycle. The Krill are systematically dismantling the Eleni systems, if we don't intervene." "Another species falls," Thomas finished, his voice permeated with a bitterness that surprised even him. He hadn't meant to say it aloud. "The galaxy is littered with the bones of extinct civilizations, Lieutenant. We can't save them all. And frankly," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "we shouldn't try." He saw the flicker of something in Park's eyes, disappointment perhaps, or maybe even a hint of pity. It stung more than he cared to admit. He knew what she saw, a man consumed by the ghosts of his past, a leader who had lost his faith in the very ideals he was sworn to uphold. The faces of the dead from Vega IV flashed in his mind, civilians, their lives extinguished because of a choice he had made. No, he thought, shoving the memories back into the locked box in his mind. Never again. He sighed, the sound heavy in the sterile air of the bridge. "Run the analysis anyway, Park, all of it. Krill fleet movements, Eleni defense capabilities, Council projections. Give me the whole damn picture. Then," he said, a spark of something flickering in his eyes, "we'll see if there's anything left to decline." The final battle raged above the shimmering, turquoise surface of the Eleni homeworld. Emerald energy lanced from the Krill dreadnoughts, clashing against the blue shields of the Terran cruisers and the fragile bioluminescent ships of the Eleni fleet. Tyler, aboard the flagship Dauntless, directed the Terran forces with a grim focus. "Hold the line. Execute maneuver Beta 9. Aurora's voice, calm and clear, echoed in his mind through their shared comlink. "The Krill are focusing their energy weapons on Sector 4. Their empathic signature is agitated. They anticipate a breakthrough." "They're predictable," Tyler muttered, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Just like we planned." He tapped a command into his console. "All ships, execute Gamma 7. Now the Terran fleet broke formation, scattering like startled fish. It was a gamble, a move the Eleni strategists deemed suicidal. But Tyler was betting on the Krill's rigid adherence to established combat protocols, their inability to adapt to the unexpected. The Krill hesitated, their formations disrupted. Now, Tyler roared. EMP cannons fire at will, target their energy conduits. Bolts of electromagnetic energy ripped through space, slamming into the Krill ships. The Krill's energy weapons sputtered and died, their shields flickered, and their internal systems overloaded. The Eleni ships, using the lull in the energy storm, launched volleys of bioluminescent torpedoes, striking critical systems. The tide of the battle began to turn. The Krill, so sure of their superiority, were faltering, unable to comprehend the humans' unorthodox tactics. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park announced, her voice tight with excitement, "we've identified the Krill flagship. Designate Oblivion. It's broadcasting the command signals for the entire fleet." "Lock a course," Tyler ordered, his eyes burning with perseverance. "I'm leading a boarding party." Minutes later, Tyler, along with a squad of heavily armed Marines, breached the Oblivion's hull. The interior was a maze of cold, metallic corridors, pulsing with an ominous energy. Krill warriors, their insectoid faces masked by emotionless helmets, swarmed to meet them. The firefight was brutal, close-quarters combat. Plasma rifles flared, and the air crackled with energy. Finally, they reached the central command chamber. Inside, the Krill leader stood before a massive console, his multifaceted eyes glowing with a cold, calculating light. He was larger than the other warriors, his chitinous armor gleaming with power. "Humans," the Krill leader hissed, his voice a synthesized rasp. "You cannot understand. We seek only connection, to unify all under one purpose." Tyler raised his rifle, but his hand trembled. He saw not a monster, but a being driven by a desperate need, a need that resonated with his own past struggles. Connection through force is no connection at all, it's domination. What do you offer instead? The Krill leader's tone was challenging. Tyler lowered his weapon. Understanding, empathy, a willingness to listen. He took a step forward. "We all crave connection, but it has to be freely given, not taken." Aurora's voice echoed in his mind, stronger now, filled with hope. "He feels lost, alone. He believes he is doing what is best." Tyler looked directly into the Krill leader's eyes. "You're not alone," he said, his voice filled with genuine empathy. "There's another way." He extended his hand, a gesture of peace. The Krill leader hesitated, his mandibles clicking softly. For a long moment they stood locked in a silent battle of wills. Then slowly the Krill leader reached out and took Tyler's hand. I do not understand," the Krill leader admitted, his voice permeated with confusion. "But I am willing to try." The Krill fleet, receiving the order from their leader, began to withdraw. The battle was over, not with a bang, but with a whisper of understanding. In the aftermath, as the Eleni began the long process of rebuilding their shattered world, a new ceremony began, an event they have been trying to achieve for eons. A planet-wide bonding ritual, a collective attempt to break the empathic barriers that had isolated them for so long. This time, they were not alone. Tyler stood beside Aurora on a hill overlooking the rebuilt Eleni capital. As the ritual reached its peak, a wave of pure, positive energy washed over the planet, spreading outwards into the galaxy. The empathic block shattered and the Eleni connected with one another for the first time in their history. A collective sigh of relief echoed across the world. Tyler gasped, overwhelmed by the surge of emotion. He felt the joy, the hope, the love of an entire species. And he felt Aurora, not just her presence, but her very essence. He could feel her gratitude, her trust, her burgeoning affection. He could feel everything she felt. "It is beautiful," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Aurora smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "We are connected, all of us." As they stood together, watching the humans and Eleni working side by side to rebuild their society, Tyler realized that they had solved each other's problems. The humans had given the Aleni the strategic and tactical advantage they needed to defeat the Krill, and the Aleni had given the humans a chance to rediscover their capacity for empathy and connection, to heal the wounds of the past. Tyler looked up at the stars, his heart filled with a sense of purpose and hope. He knew that there would be future challenges, that the galaxy was a vast and dangerous place. But he also knew that humanity, with its unique blend of ingenuity, resilience, and empathy, was not alone. They had found allies, friends, and a shared purpose. He thought of the faces he had let down in the past. He was not that man anymore. The alliance between humans and Aleni became a beacon of hope for other species in the galaxy, signaling a new era of peace and understanding, an era where connection was valued above all else. The final scene shows Tyler standing on the bridge of the Dauntless, looking out at the stars. A faint smile plays on his lips. The galaxy is still full of unknowns, but for the first time in a long time, he feels a sense of peace. He knows that there will be future challenges, but he is confident that humanity and its allies can overcome them together. He is ready.